Valentine's week, and nothing says Valentine's Day like Bruce Wayne shackled to a bed.
And with that said, welcome to the ARKHAM Sessions. My name is Brian Ward.
And I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
This is the ARKHAM Sessions. It's the only show on the web where you can get an analysis of Batman the Animated Series from a real clinical psychologist.
And a total geek.
That's right. So we're going to jump into the episode, but before we do that, we want to take care of some behind-the-scenes business. Andrea, you were recently on a podcast alone, but then I joined you for another podcast last week. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Sure. A couple weeks ago, I was on Coffee with Kenobi. This is a podcast that is basically all things Star Wars, and so it was a fantastic time. We talked about actually the psychology of Darth Vader, along with some other villains. And we talked a bit about this show, the ARKHAM Sessions, and about the psychology of Batman and some of the Gotham City villains. So,
as well as Batman, you are a gigantic Star Wars nerd.
Any chance I can talk about Star Wars, I will take it. You can find that podcast on coffeewithkenobi.com.
And we appeared together over at Fanboy Comics on the Previews Party podcast.
That's right. We joined Jason, Scott, and Christine to talk about the Previews magazine, which is basically this
catalog.
Yeah, it's a catalog of all the comics, all the graphic novels, and collectibles that come out every month. And so they have a monthly podcast where they talk all about these upcoming comic collectibles and comic books, and it was a blast.
We talked a lot about Batman and the upcoming Batman comics, and then and had a good time talking about the show. Those guys over there are fantastic, so go check them out at fanboycomics.net and look for Previews Party. So let's jump right into it. Episode 8, The Forgotten. This one aired October 8th, 1992. It was actually the 23rd in the air date order. It's number 8 in the production order, and we've been going in the production order. It was written by Richard Mueller, Jules Dennis, and Sean Catherine Derrick, and it was directed by Boyd Kirkland. This is the one where we get to meet Boss Biggest, a one-off villain for this episode. It's the Cool Hand Luke of Batman the Animated Series.
I don't know what that means, but I do know that this happens to be another really fantastic episode that does go into the psychology of memory loss.
We open up Bruce Wayne. He's actually messing with me now. He's sort of messing with my theory a little bit. He's at a soup kitchen helping out, and we learned that
I can't prove it, but I'm positive people are disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know why. And it's a pretty common trope. The homeless people that went missing, but only a couple of people ever really noticed. But this bothers Bruce. So he actually goes undercover, dons a disguise, white hair, a fake 5 o'clock shadow.
He clearly puts a lot of time and effort into his disguise.
I'm impressed, though, if it really actually fools anybody, because I've used stage makeup. And it's not all that realistic up close.
Well, he seems to fool the homeless folks that he runs into as he patrols the streets. He gets into his car. He finds sort of the local areas.
His Studebaker. He
takes the Studebaker.
Yeah.
And he goes to the local areas where he knows there will be these homeless folks. And
vagrants, vagabonds.
Correct. And as expected, something happens.
He's down on the Bowery, and he's approached by 2 men who offer him,
"Hey, buddy, you looking for a job?" "Maybe." "What kind of job?"
"Oh, you'll like it. It's long-term employment."
I thought they were going to proposition him for something else.
Yeah, and then they pick a fight. It's kind of a weak fight, but they pick a fight. And in an odd moment of Bruce not really being aware of his surroundings, he is hit upside the back of his head and is knocked unconscious.
I want to say he let that happen.
I'm not sure he let them hit him upside the back of the head.
I don't know that Bruce Wayne would be left so vulnerable. I think that he, maybe on some level,
He was
knew-
pretty cocky though. During the fight, he like never even takes his hands out of his coat pockets. So it is uncharacteristic of Bruce. But he does get knocked unconscious. Wakes up somewhere, he has no idea.
shackled to a bed.
Shackled to a bed. He doesn't know where he is, but most importantly,
So, what's your name, pal?
I don't know.
he doesn't know who he is. Now, Andrea, let's talk a little bit about amnesia.
Well, amnesia is a very real thing. Most folks have probably heard of anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is essentially the inability to form new memories. That's not really what Bruce has here, because we can see that he seems to be functioning quite well, at this labor camp.
Is this the memento
Yeah.
amnesia?
Yeah, the guy that tattoos himself with
Yeah.
reminders. Yeah, that's actually a real thing. Retrograde amnesia is the inability to remember events, situations, parts of the self prior to the event that caused the amnesia. What Bruce had was this blow to the head. So he could be suffering from traumatic brain injury, and that could be causing his amnesia. So just to kind of clarify, traumatic brain injury is, as it sounds, an injury that's caused by a blow to the head. And that can actually cause bruising and injury to your brain. And that is what could be responsible for his amnesia. And we would consider him to be suffering from retrograde amnesia because he can't remember anything about himself. I would find, just generally speaking, this scenario for Bruce to be hit over the head and to have memory loss, that's actually pretty common. The kind of amnesia he has, though, that's what's really rare. The way that he's presenting with this, what we call global amnesia or transient global amnesia, in the sense that he has no idea who he is, where he is, when in time it is. Like, he's basically lost all orientation. That's incredibly rare. And that's the part of this that, although not totally fictional, I mean, this has happened to some people, it is a rarer form of amnesia.
So he doesn't know where he is, and it turns out that he is, for lack of a better word, he's part of a chain gang. It's not official. He's not in prison. He wasn't arrested. He was actually abducted and taken to this, I guess it's an ore mine of sorts. The bad guy of the episode, Boss Biggest.
Why aren't these lowlifes working?
A gigantic Boss Hog-esque character, constantly eating.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really menacing. He just seems bossy, and clearly he's willing to torture these guys because he has this method to sort of keep them in line. But he doesn't have, of course, he doesn't have, great intelligence. He doesn't have weapons. He doesn't have any kind of,
He's the standard kind of
Yeah.
boss character, the that you would find in a prison film where you've got, you've got that character that he's mean.
You bums better start busting butt,
He's trying to break the will of everybody in the camp.
or you'll all end up like him.
And really, it's just for his own good. He wants more of the ore. He wants to be rich, and he's using these guys, and he's willing to use them as examples for the others if need be. Generally, just not a good guy. And we constantly see him eating throughout the show, and we constantly then see or hear him eating throughout the show. And it turns out that George Murdoch was actually eating during the record sessions. And those sound effects are all exactly what we're hearing when Boss Biggest is eating his turkey legs and whatever.
gross.
Right. I will say that as a redhead myself,
Oh, here we go.
It is a very small percentage of the global population are redheads. We now know where they all are. They're all either in Gotham City as villains, or they're in this work camp. There are a lot of gingers in this place, and most of them are either bad guys, as we've grown accustomed to in Batman the Animated Series, or they're weaklings who, when during brawls are taking place, there is literally a shot that cuts away to two redheads standing next to each other, not doing anything. Like, they are terrified of the fight that's going on, and the two gingers are over there literally watching mouths agape. Like, it is embarrassing to be a redhead on Batman the Animated Series.
And there is that one, well, because Bruce Wayne befriends two guys.
Right. One of them is a smart alecky ginger.
Hey, don't mind him. Every chain gang has a comedian.
He's the mouthy one.
Right, and he's sort of wafy and,
Yeah.
not very, you don't think he can defend
He's
himself.
just this side of Gollum. Like, he's very, he's thin, and likes to hear himself talk, and, is constantly making jokes.
I was one of Gotham City's unemployed. Now I got a job. Lucky me.
Well, and the other guy, Dan, makes friends with Bruce Wayne, and they get to know each other. Of course, Bruce doesn't know who he is. He's asked, what's your name? Who are you? And he's like, I don't remember. Which that in and of itself can be really jarring for somebody. Could be traumatizing just to sort of lose your identity. And so when he realizes that, there's this moment of confusion, and I think that he's pretty resilient, because he, over the period of how long do you think they're in this camp? I mean, they're there for at least a couple of days.
He is, yeah. I mean, they've been there longer.
Yeah, but he's there for less than a week. This takes place over just a couple of days. Maybe
Alfred
3 days.
notices that he's gone.
That's odd. Only vampires loathe daylight more than Batman.
And immediately jumps into action to find Master Bruce.
Right. So in that period of time, he bounces back in the sense that he participates in the labor. He's working. He's befriending people. He's, I guess what I'm getting at here is that even though he has this serious amnesia, he still has other abilities intact. So emotional, personality, somatic, there are no somatic symptoms that are co-occurring with his amnesia. There are no motor problems. There are no physical problems. That's why I said this is actually very rare. In this case, incredibly rare, that he has this severe amnesia and doesn't have any other deficits going on.
Yeah, because when they do get into the fight where Dan is fighting a number of the guards, Bruce jumps in to help, and he is in full Batman form. I mean, he and Dan are holding off this whole group of guys.
Hey, you really cleaned that clocks.
You did pretty good yourself.
So while he doesn't remember who he is, he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't necessarily know when he is, muscle memory is all there.
Yeah, he definitely can still. I think it's kind of cool too, because in that fight, it's a pretty cool fight. He's definitely showing that he doesn't have to have the armor and the gadgets and the weapons to to defend himself. It's just his guns,
but not actually.
No,
guns.
not his guns. His fists, and it's kind of a cool fight because we get to see Bruce Wayne in this, these high-waisted pants and his tight tank top as he's just
in his white
moment.
hair.
In his at this point, his magic makeup, his theater makeup has certainly held up. because he still has that white hair. So he kind of looks like an older version of himself, which is interesting because he doesn't know who he is. So we're sort of not recognizing who he is. And it's kind of a cool scene to see that fight.
Bruce, while asleep, ends up having a couple of pretty bad nightmares that are kind of, I guess, trying to jumpstart his memory. He's looking through like carnival mirrors and seeing different versions of himself. None of them look right. And then he turns around and sees Bruce Wayne laughing. And he walks over to the mirror to look at Bruce Wayne, and suddenly the Joker's hands come crashing through the mirror and grab Bruce and pull him through, and they go falling together down toward the city of Gotham, and that's when Bruce wakes up. I mean, he is learning who he is through these nightmares. And it's interesting that he chose the Joker to dream about as well.
Well, he didn't choose the Joker to dream about.
His mind chose the Joker to dream about.
I mean, that's actually very realistic. I think that's another cool point that they were making, that while he doesn't know who he is when he's awake, he has these subconscious kind of themes and relationships that come through in his dreams. And what we see in that dream, in addition to the Joker, we also see there's he and the Joker sort of fall into the city, and then he finds himself as Bruce Wayne standing in the street, and people are coming to him and asking for money, and he starts giving them money to the point where he's just surrounded by people, and there's this close-up of his face, and he's just kind of hopeless. Like, he's terrified and hopeless and feeling like he just can't give enough. And I think those dreams lay down this, the foundation of what his core worries and fears are in regards to his memory. Although he doesn't know it yet at this point, he is that person that's defending the city. So the Joker is the villain that represents what he's fighting against. At the same time as Bruce Wayne, he's ostensibly this philanthropist that is also trying to help the city. In the beginning of the episode, he's peeling potatoes with the manager of that soup kitchen. So he sees himself as someone who is trying to give back to the city and wants to help other people, wants others to have opportunities that he has. But that dream tells us that he was failing at that.
In the second dream, Bruce actually sees an image of himself as Batman, and then it dissolves into Bruce, and we know that Bruce now knows exactly who he is. They're in the boxes, and the hot boxes.
Right. Well, this as punishment, Boss Biggest puts these guys into these very small metal boxes and locks them in there out in the sun. And it's
which we've seen in a lot of prison movies. They put them in the box.
Well, it's solitary confinement.
Yeah. Right.
Except in this case, it's out in the sun, and there's almost this idea that if you're in that box too long, you could die of what? Of heat stroke, dehydration, whatnot. Yeah. So they're in. He and his buddy Dan are both being hotboxed, and I think it's Dan that says, tell me about your family, or something about his family. And the word family triggers Bruce to remember. He suddenly can recall his parents and who he is and what his mission is. And it all comes back to him. And although it's a bit unrealistic for all those memories to happen at once, typically with different types of amnesia, of course, depending on the type, memories actually come back gradually. They don't all of a sudden come all at once. They happen gradually. And interestingly, for some treatments for people who have amnesia, one of the recommendations for family members is to show them things that are familiar to them. For example, show them photographs of their family members, show them photographs of themselves, show them their favorite things, their favorite clothing, foods, try to trigger those memories. And you do it by gradually introducing them to different things that they were familiar with, usually in their home. And so, you remember regarding Henry?
Yes. Ritz.
What?
Ritz.
Was that the thing that helped him remember?
Yes.
Well, I can't remember. I can't remember that movie, but
You're about to bring up regarding Henry, but you don't remember Ritz.
But what I do remember about that movie is that what the family needed to do was introduce Harrison Ford, or at least his character,
Henry.
What the family had to do was introduce him to things that could trigger his memory, things that he was familiar with. So it was, although it's unrealistic that all of Bruce Wayne's memories come back all at once, it is true that usually something, a word or Ritz crackers can help you remember. So how long do you think he was out for? Because we don't really have a good sense of that.
A couple hours.
Yeah, and I ask because the amount of time that you might have lost consciousness has a huge impact on the kind of amnesia you might have, as well as how you're going to recover from it, and whether the effects are going to be permanent or temporary.
Really?
Yeah, so let's just say he was out for a couple of hours. He would be more likely to have some kind of amnesia. But frankly, as I said before, he would also have a slew of other symptoms following this head injury, following this traumatic brain injury. That could include, in addition to memory problems, cognitive problems, personality issues, somatic, physical issues, as well as motor issues. So a bunch of other things that we're not seeing him experience. So again, this is kind of a fictional version of retrograde amnesia and total what we call global amnesia, because he doesn't remember a single thing. But he is forming new memories. He is able to lay down new memories. So he does seem to have some, memory functions intact.
So one thing that if you follow us on Twitter at ARKHAM Sessions, or if you follow us on Facebook, we asked fans to submit their own questions about the show, to watch the show in advance, submit their own questions for Drea. And we got one. We got a couple of them, actually. So Jason wrote in with a couple of good questions. We talked about a couple of them already, but he's got one here. In this episode, we see a much more caring Bruce Wayne trying to help the poor and disenfranchised. Does this poke any holes in Brian's theory about Bruce's Batman? About Bruce and Batman?
Yeah, it does, because as we talked about, he's clearly wanting to help this community.
So just to set the record straight, if you've listened to previous episodes, Jason is asking about an ongoing joke that you and I have had, where I believe that Bruce Wayne suffers from antisocial personality disorder, and you say that he does not.
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
Not given the information that we have.
Right. So clearly we see that Bruce is helping in the soup kitchen. He is helping, he's got these dream sequences where he doesn't feel like he can help enough. We even see him shed a tear in one of them. He is helping out the people in this sort of chain gang environment, even when he doesn't know that he's Batman. So does this entire episode just throw that hypothesis out the window?
Well, Jason's right. We see that there is this humanity that he's showing us just, from the very beginning, that he's contributing and participating in giving back to the community by helping at the soup kitchen. But even at this labor camp, he's sort of befriending these two guys. We see that he's forming relationships with them, and that's very unlike someone who has antisocial personality disorder, who wouldn't be interested in forming relationships and wouldn't have the need for that. They would be isolated and kind of out for themselves and, wouldn't be caring about other people. I get the sense that he, at some point, understood that he could probably fight his way out of there, but it wasn't until he realized who he was, that he was Batman, and saved those guys, that he got them out of there. He came back once he was, we didn't talk about this yet, but Alfred not only discovers that Bruce is missing, but the Studebaker's missing too. So, of course, he has a tracking device, tracks down where this vehicle is,
Right.
and then to the truck that leaves the lot,
Right.
and goes to this, this camp, this labor camp. So he ends up hopping into the Batwing and locating Bruce that way.
And Alfred is not a pilot.
Oh dear.
Oh no,
we can-
he's clearly very uncomfortable in that.
He's the C-3PO in this situation. He is not comfortable in a flying device.
This is right. So he rescues Bruce, but Bruce ends up coming back as Batman to rescue the rest of the guys.
Right. Okay, so I have a counter question for that. We know that personality disorders in general aren't necessarily genetic. It's not necessarily something that you're born with. You can acquire them. You have said that certain events could lead to personality disorders. Correct?
Well, nothing is entirely genetic and nothing is entirely environmental.
So if Bruce Wayne has this global amnesia, is it possible that his personality disorder can disappear with that as well? Like, if Bruce's personality is in essence gone, wouldn't his personality disorder also temporarily be gone until he's Batman again?
Well, that's true. If he has total loss of his identity and doesn't regain his memories, then essentially we're talking about a dysfunction of the brain in the sense that he can't remember anything about himself. And a personality disorder is a function of the brain. So he could lose the ability to remember that part of himself. However, as we see, he regains all of his memories.
Right.
And for most memory disorders, people actually do regain a good part of their memories. It's gradual, but people do a lot of times regain their memories. So based on those cases where people regain their memories and they're not that different than the people they were before the traumatic event or the traumatic brain injury, then, I would say he would probably still have that personality disorder if he had it in the first place.
Because I will say that once he regains his memory and his personality as Batman, he comes back, he rescues them, yes, but that's what Batman does. He then identifies himself as Bruce Wayne, billionaire, to these people in Gotham, sort of offers them a job, and then, as if to slap them in the face a little bit, hops into his limousine driven by his chauffeur, and is like, see you guys later. So he's made friends when he doesn't know who he is, when he doesn't have his past traumas, when he doesn't have his mission, when he doesn't remember his parents having died. But then after he remembers, he offers to be their boss.
Yeah, he's kind of like, see you later.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump into my nice car now. So maybe this episode doesn't completely sink the hypothesis. We will find out in the coming episodes. We'll let it keep going.
Hit me, Riley.
Hit you? Why?
Maybe I'll lose my memory and wake up a millionaire too.
Did you know actually there was a case where a guy had a brain injury and then developed a personality disorder?
No?
It's probably one of the most famous neurological kind of cases in history, and it happened in the mid-1800s, and his name was Phineas Gage, and he was like a railroad supervisor working on the railroad, and this 3-foot iron rod shot through.
Oh, yeah, the one that shot through the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it shot through his head And sorry to get gruesome, folks, but it actually shot through his cheek and into what we call his frontal lobes, like the front part of his brain. And interestingly, this became a famous case because following that injury, now luckily he survived, but following that injury, his personality was vastly different. He was known.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, why?
He's got a giant spike that went through his brain. My personality would change a lot too.
It's the 1800s. They knew little about psychology. Prior to his injury, he was known to be very friendly. He was known to be social. He was very well-mannered. And then following this injury, he got treated. He survived it, but he was never the same. He was considered, people felt he was antisocial. He was saying profanities when he shouldn't. He didn't have any organizational or planning skills. He was not friendly. He wasn't social anymore. And people began to, experts, psychologists, neurologists at the time were beginning to understand that parts of the brain are responsible for certain functioning. And the front part of our brain is largely in part responsible for things like organization and planning and concentration and things like personality. So when you say that Bruce's personality could have been changed actually by this blow to the head, that's actually pretty realistic. He may have had some long-term brain injuries that would have caused his personality to be different. But I'm remembering where he was hit in the head. And wasn't it in the back of the head?
It was in the back of the head.
Yeah. So we're less likely to see personality change, and we're more likely to see actually issues with vision, coordination, balance, perhaps depending on the side, motor issues. So yeah, there's not a lot known based on just sort of seeing him get hit, but I would actually counter your argument and say, based on where he was hit in the head, I would say he would not have personality changes.
Yeah, but you would also say that based on where he was hit in the head, he wouldn't lose his entire life worth of memory either.
No, it's not likely to cause memory loss the way that it did.
So thank you, Jason, for your question. If you have a question about upcoming episodes, if you can get a chance to watch them either on DVD or YouTube or other places that we don't want to know anything about, check out the episodes before we get a chance to cover them. Hit us up on Facebook. We are the ARKHAM Sessions. Or you can hit us up on Twitter, also at ARKHAM Sessions. And ask your questions. We will be happy to address them on the show going forward. By the way, as you had a real life example, I don't really have a real life example this week of, homeless people being abducted and taken out to chain gangs. But I will say that last year in Detroit, the ACLU actually requested that the Detroit Police Department stop abducting homeless people and driving them outside the city.
What?
Yes. They apparently, I think it was like in April of last year, the Detroit police were known to forcibly take homeless folks, throw them into vans, drive them outside the city limits to other neighboring cities and communities and drop them off there.
Now, that doesn't sound like a very productive social program.
No, it's not really going to help all that much.
No.
Okay, so that's episode 8, The Forgotten. Join us next week when we'll take a look at one of our old friends, the Joker, in episode 9, Be a Clown. This will be a great opportunity for us, Andrea, because it'll be the 3rd time that we have seen the Joker.
That's right.
We'll get to see if his personality has changed at all, or if his relationship with Batman has changed at all. So that's next week. If you were listening to us on iTunes, please give us a rating, drop us a review. Find us on Twitter at ARKHAM Sessions. Find us on Facebook, the ARKHAM Sessions. Drop us a line. Let us know what you think of the show. We listen to feedback. We always want to make sure everything is awesome for you guys. So let us know what you think. And be sure to spread the word. we would love to do this for as many listeners as find it interesting. So come back next week, and we'll see you then. Until then, I'm Brian Ward.
And I'm Andrea Letamendi.
And we are the ARKHAM Sessions.
See you next time.
Soup kitchen, helping out, and we learned that
I can't prove it, but I'm positive people are disappearing.
and we don't know why. And it's a pretty common trope. The homeless people that went missing, but only a couple of people ever really noticed. But this bothers Bruce. So he actually goes undercover, dons a disguise, white hair, a fake 5 o'clock shadow.
He clearly puts a lot of time and effort into his disguise.
I'm impressed though if it really actually fools anybody, because I've used stage makeup and it's not all that realistic up close.
Well, he seems to fool the homeless folks that he runs into as he patrols the streets. He gets into his car. He finds sort of the local areas.
Studebaker. He
takes the Studebaker.
Yeah.
And he goes to the local areas where he knows there will be these homeless folks. And it's Valentine's week, and nothing says Valentine's Day like Bruce Wayne's shackled to a bed.
And with that said, welcome to the ARKHAM Sessions. My name is Brian Ward.
And I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
This is the ARKHAM Sessions. It's the only show on the web where you can get an analysis of Batman the Animated Series from a real clinical psychologist.
And a total geek.
That's right. So we're going to jump into the episode, but before we do that, we want to take care of some behind-the-scenes business. Andrea, you were recently on a podcast alone, but then I joined you for another podcast last week. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Sure. A couple weeks ago, I was on Coffee with Kenobi. This is a podcast that is basically all things Star Wars, and so it was a fantastic time. We talked about actually the psychology of Darth Vader, along with some other villains. And we talked a bit about this show, the ARKHAM Sessions, and about the psychology of Batman and some of the Gotham City villains. So,
as well as Batman, you are a gigantic Star Wars nerd.
Any chance I can talk about Star Wars, I will take it. You can find that podcast on coffeewithkenobi.com.
And we appeared together over at Fanboy Comics on the Previews Party podcast.
That's right. We joined Jason, Scott, and Christine to talk about the Previews magazine, which is basically this
catalog.
Yeah, it's a catalog of all the comics, all the graphic novels, and collectibles that come out every month. And so they have a monthly podcast where they talk all about these upcoming comic collectibles and comic books, and it was a blast.
We talked a lot about vagrants, vagabonds.
Correct. And as expected, something happens.
He's down on the Bowery, and he's approached by two men who offer him,
Hey, buddy, you looking for a job? Maybe. What kind of job?
Oh, you'll like it. It's long-term employment.
I thought they were going to proposition him for something else.
Yeah, and then they pick a fight. It's kind of a weak fight, but they pick a fight. And in an odd moment of Bruce not really being aware of his surroundings, he is hit upside the back of his head and is knocked unconscious.
I want to say he let that happen.
I'm not sure he let them hit him upside the back of the head.
I don't know that Bruce Wayne would be left so vulnerable. I think that he maybe on some level
He was pretty cocky though. During the fight, he never even takes his hands out of his coat pockets. So it is uncharacteristic of Bruce, but he does get knocked unconscious. Wakes up about Batman and the upcoming Batman comics, and then had a good time talking about the show. Those guys over there are fantastic. So go check them out at fanboycomics.net and look for previews party. So let's jump right into it. Episode 8, The Forgotten. This one aired October 8th, 1992. It was actually the 23rd in the air date order. It's number 8 in the production order, and we've been going in the production order. It was written by Richard Mueller, Jules Dennis, and Sean Catherine Derrick, and it was directed by Boyd Kirkland. This is the one where we get to meet Boss Biggest, a one-off villain for this episode. It's the Cool Hand Luke of Batman the Animated Series.
I don't know what that means, but I do know that this happens to be another really fantastic episode that does go into the psychology of memory loss.
We open up Bruce Wayne. He's actually messing with me now. He's sort of messing with my theory a little bit. He's at a